Hello, everybody. I am Valère from Cluster Tweed. On behalf of the partner of the EMR H2 Booster project, I would like to thank you all for your participation to this webinar today and to enjoy the opportunity to take up our main objective. The partner of the project are the respective hydrogen clusters, development agencies, and one university covering the EMR H2 territory. It is Aachen, Dutch Limburg, Belgian Limburg, and Liège. Our common goal is to boost the development of clean hydrogen in this EMR region, innovation, demonstration, knowledge sharing as a first step towards a large scale-up of the clean hydrogen economy with a focus on SMEs. In the framework of this project, we have entrusted Hydrogen Advisors and SEIA Consulting to carry out a EMR H2 roadmap study. And I will give soon the floor to Raphael Schungen for the restitution. Right after, I give a quick word about the upcoming event, which is a continuation of this webinar to meet us in person the 18th of April in the legendary circuit of Spa-Francorchamps. The main lines of the program are inspiring presentation, the morning hydrogen vehicle parade on the circuit with presentation of the projects during the business lunch, and a very promising B2B session the afternoon. I also invite you to visit the EMR H2 Booster website, where you can find the event, and you can register. So we will be able to send you a B2Match link to organize your own B2B session with the key hydrogen players already confirmed. And we will ask you to confirm in which sub-ecosystem you are interested in, you would like to be involved: road corridor, river corridor, or EMR H2 corridor. Thank you for your attention, and I give the floor to Raphael.
Thanks, Valère. Very happy to be with all of you today, together with Leopold, who will probably introduce himself just after me. Leopold, could you take the floor 1 second so that everybody sees you? You are muted.
My camera is open, but
okay, so that everybody can see you. So together with Leopold, who is from SEIA, we are two advisory companies that are specialized in supporting regions in Europe developing hydrogen plays. And we have been entrusted by the different sponsors of this study to give a hand. And so without further ado, I will show you the outcome of the different interviews we have carried out, and which give an aggregated view of the current status of the hydrogen economy in the Euregion Meuse-Rhine. The presentation will probably last close to half an hour, maybe a little bit more. I suggest I run it through because there's a lot of information. And from there, we start a dialogue. All questions are welcomed. I will ask Cédric and Valère, our hosts today, to help with moderation and look at the feed. So you can put your question, raise your hands, or put your questions as it goes in the feed. Thanks a lot for being here. We have 140 participants registered and already 70, close to 70 in the room. And it probably will increase as it goes. If you wonder, the slides will be distributed after the presentation, so you can just relax and no need to do whatever to get them. You will receive them afterwards. So I move now to the presentation. And so first question, I do hope everybody feels well, is why are we all here today? Valère gave some idea, and what comes next also gave some idea, and we'll come back to it. So we have in the Euregion a number of talented players, you and many others, but there is right now no aggregated view of the hydrogen production / use in the region and the equation. And we also have a situation with people do not necessarily know what's happening across the border. And so starting from there, we have been asked to help identify the group of players, define this global equation, and also the anchoring dynamics of the development of the hydrogen economy in the region, and then help develop a hydrogen ecosystem across the region. So this basically now will lead us, and that is what we will further work together on during the Francorchamps event, on 3 streams, which is fundamentally work together to further structure the H2 ecosystem in the region. And you'll see there's a certain number of things that we can do. Second, focus specifically on what's happening, what we call a hydrogen road corridor, everything related to heavy duty mobility on road. And third, work together on a hydrogen river corridor is everything related to using hydrogen along rivers, but also transporting hydrogen on rivers. Now we'll detail you what came out of the interviews, and you will understand very easily how we come to these 3 streams for our next action. So we had a list of interviews to carry out, and we have interviewed, as you can see, people across the spectrum, from industrial actors to hydrogen producers, to gas network operators, waterways actors, public entities and clusters, and of course, all the sponsors of this study, and then R&D players. But we have not interviewed them in a random order. We have had a structured approach, starting from the question which was raised to us in the first place. We don't see clearly the power, so the production to X use of hydrogen in the region. Can you help on this? And then, of course, there will be a need to dig down on the mobility side and look also at the H2 ecosystem that are blossoming to further support them. So we started from the left, and we started by asking ourselves, okay, well, we have a hydrogen economy. Where will hydrogen come from? And with that, we started focusing on H2 pipelines and engaging with the major TSOs of respectively Belgium, the Netherlands, and Germany that are active in the Euro region. After that, we said, okay, we need to try to identify where is the large offtake. So we gave focus to the largest project in the region, and we engaged with a certain number of large players. Then we wondered, well, next to this global equation of the pipelines, is there a H2 production locally at scale? And we realized not immediately, but quite rapidly, though, after 3-4 weeks, that there was really not so much production in the Euro region. I will detail that. And the main H2 import routes rollout will be the focus. How quickly are we going to have pipelines? And we also asked ourselves that, okay, we have these beautiful Rhine and Meuse rivers that are super large. Can H2 and H2 derivatives come actually via these rivers? So we started discussing with different authorities and players along the rivers with one clear focus, which is, okay, H2 rivers are H2 ways. And what about, the regulation in place and the priorities? What's going on there? From there, we move to what about the ecosystem that are using hydrogen, okay? And which ecosystem gather them? Of course, we looked at H2 imports and in imports, in industrial zone, in airports, and then we moved back to the rivers, and we further detailed what's going on with barges and what's going on with logistics zones, with trucks and related stations close to those rivers. After that, we said, well, maybe we should also wonder whether we could do something with freight. And we touched upon competencies, technologies, cluster of tech, and people working, to be experts in one or another field of the hydrogen economy to support what's going on in the region. And then what about skill set development? And what about what's in for SMEs? Because this is one key element of this project, is that we are able also to support SMEs. So with this, already at this stage, a certain number of key elements came out. First, we noticed that it's probably small on your screen, but I'll read you the main part, and we will get then the paper copy. First, you have certain number of players that have a better vision of what's going on than others, and namely, of course, the major TSOs. But there's still not an aggregated view of what's happening at the Euregion level. So even those TSOs don't necessarily know what is happening behind the border in the neighboring country. It's in detail, I mean. It took a while, as I mentioned, for us to see that in the power to X equation, so basically there was no local production, or almost no local production, and then it was mostly imports. And then when we started further engaging with people, they say, yeah, of course, it's imports plays a major role. We noticed a lot of interest from all of you. Players are all very interested, all eager to know what's going on behind the border. And many of them do not know. They know about what's going on in their own country and province, not necessarily what's going on beyond. Then, regarding heavy-duty road transport on the one hand side and inland rivers, we notice, and we will further detail this, that there is a risk of potential unbalanced development of hydrogen refueling stations on highways, because the subsidy schemes are quite different from one country to the other one. Then inland rivers, we notice that all actors are working on it, but with different levels of, let's say, stage. There are different stages of reflection. So they could be a united view to develop, to move faster. And then last but not least, and very important, several players mentioned, well, there's probably a gap between the vision to fully decarbonize everything and the implementation and how with speed we can develop things. And we would need a roadmap that takes into account, reality and what can be done, so that 1 + 1 makes 2 and not 1 + 1 makes 3. And that is also important, the need to give all stakeholders a vision of the rollout and the roadmap. So I come back to the fundamental question, where will hydrogen in the Euregion Meuse-Rhine come from? This is a very nice picture coming from the Wuppertal Institute that has been also used in the Import Energy Coalition reports developed by Waterstofnet and all its partners, looking at hydrogen imports in Belgium. And that map shows you the unbalance between energy production and energy use across Europe. And you see, we are in the place in Europe where actually we need much more energy than we can actually produce. So the import equation will be at the core. Now, looking at solar resource in the Euregion region, you see that we are not that blessed compared to the 1,000 part of Europe. And roughly there is twice less solar irradiation here where we live than in the 1,000 part of Europe. So solar is kind of off the game. Regarding wind, it's much better. Still not as good as along the shores or in Denmark, but it's much better. But the problem is that, and we didn't know about it until some people told us about this fantastic project, the Euregion is one of the 2 finalists for the Einstein Gravitational Wave Observatory, which is a major piece of international research equipment. And one of the reasons, if you go to their website for the Euregion to be a very good candidate, is that there is counter stability and there are no heavy industrial plants, as you can see, and wind turbines, because wind turbines will affect winds that will affect the gravitational waves. And so this, plus the fact that we are very happy to be contemplating a region that is very rich in terms of fauna, animals and plants, but that leads also to constraints in terms of Natura 2000 zones. And if you add the 2, it leads to some difficulties to develop new projects. And you see here the Dahlem wind farm project that was stopped because of the Einstein project. So it is a reality that putting windmills in the region is a challenge. So that boils down fundamentally to, the largest quantity, if they are not going to come from electrolyzers, we still have some cards up the sleeves that we'll show you afterwards. But the import routes will be key. So we have put here on the screen a map that you already probably certainly have seen, which is the map of future hydrogen backbones in Europe in 2030 and 2040 in the next slide. So for those who have never seen this map, the yellow parts are new hydrogen pipelines that will be built, and the dark one are existing gas pipelines that will be retrofitted to fit hydrogen. And what we see here is that, you know, we need hydrogen in the Euregion, so we need to understand when it's going to come, because that will be the triggering point of the development of the hydrogen economy in the Euregion. So the first question we need to ask ourselves is, when will we get hydrogen imports in Rotterdam, Antwerp, and Zeebrugge? The second question is, at which speed shall we have a retrofit of the hydrogen pipelines coming from the Netherlands? Third question is, at which speed will we deploy new hydrogen pipelines from Antwerp to Liège? The next one, the fourth, is at which speed will we have a new hydrogen pipeline across the border between Germany and Belgium? And we need to acknowledge that all this, you know, is in the eyes of our, you know, key decision makers. I had the Prime Minister of Germany and Belgium that were recently in Antwerp, so it's part of the equation, but we need to further understand, we as a community, how quickly this is going to happen. And then the fifth question is, in Germany, while you have, you know, some new projects, especially the Get H2 nucleus project, which is a key piece of pipeline for hydrogen that is being developed, okay, at which speed will the different gas pipelines be retrofitted so that it can bring hydrogen from the northern part of Germany? Because this route here in the south and coming from France will only come later. Okay, so hydrogen will mainly flow from the left and the north, the west and the north. And then last question, what will be the different projects that will produce hydrogen on the shore of Belgium, Netherlands, and Germany on top of the imports, so that we have an idea of what is available? Knowing that between the Euregion, which is in hinterland, and the coastal areas, there are all the other ones who will wish to grab molecules on their way. In 2040, there will be two additional dimensions, which will be gas pipeline retrofitted here in Belgium, which will be additional routes from Brussels to Liège, and also a connection to Luxembourg, while in the meantime, you see there's an additional number of pipelines that will channel hydrogen from the southern part of Europe. So that is one thing, which is, you know, all these pipelines. Another thing to keep in mind is also the development of the hydrogen market, an integrated hydrogen market in Europe. You may or may not know that there are some systems already in place, like H2 Global in Germany, will probably be implemented in the Netherlands and Belgium as well. As for France, it is not sure at all. It will be that system. So we need to understand also that, so that the economy of hydrogen develops quickly in the region. As you remember, after looking at the different imports, we decided to look also at the big project. So we took a map. Here you see the Euregion with a square in the further extended region. The different dots are the CO2 emissions, give you an idea of where the industrial zones are. And we will here show you a certain number of projects. It's not fully exhaustive. They are all public, and you can see them on the internet. Just to be clear, we had a number of interviews. They were all confidential, and what we have gathered here is only public information, okay, to give a high level view. So in Rotterdam, there's 2 × 200 green hydrogen local production projects. In Antwerp, you certainly have heard about the 100 projects by Plug Power, then Air Liquide in Terneuse with 200 megawatts. You have certainly also heard about Eolian Fluxys at 25 megawatts extended to 100 megawatts to the west of Flanders. Then the Carmeuse NG project of 75 megawatts to do e-gas next to Namur. The Kemelo industrial zone must be also familiar to you. It suffers a bit with this chemical zone with the international crisis. And so we have here a zone which we will change. And the pattern of what's happening at the corner of the region. Then you have on the eastern side a certain number of projects that we cannot detail because they are confidential, but we heard a certain number of names. And in the Liège region, We have a number of also industrial zones that could be converted to develop hydrogen projects, and also a port. Somebody was asking in the chat, I could see it, I gave a glimpse, if we have looked at what is happening up north in the Rhine River Delta. We didn't look at everything yet, as I mentioned. It's just to give you an idea of what's going on at a high level, so it's not an exhaustive view. So as a summary here, if you look at what we have said, you have a fundamental equation, which is in the middle, the import equation, with different import nodes. Antwerp, Zeebrugge, Dunkerque, Rotterdam, Wilhelmshaven, and Hamburg, central column. And those will be connected via shipping routes to global H2 markets, and then via potentially additional network to Norway, United Kingdom, and North Sea offshore wind place. To the left, that leaves us with the local production that we have seen as pretty low, starting from wind and solar, even though very good subsidy schemes in Germany, namely, leads to the development of green hydrogen project in the EMR region. We have not explored yet, but we need to mention it 3 points, which is first, the production from grid power in the different regions. And we need to see also that you have, for instance, in Province de Liège, the Tihange reactor, as well as in Dutch Limburg, the idea to develop, it's in the plan of the province to develop some small nuclear reactors. So we need to take that also into account, but we don't know yet it's going to be low carbon will be in the upcoming EU regulation. But that could be a source, people deciding to produce locally hydrogen, buying hydrogen from the grid. And last but not least, there are a couple of pilot projects using waste and doing waste for hydrogen. There is abundance, biomass resource and waste resource in the region. And that could be an area for further interest to develop a local production. As regards the users, and how hydrogen will be brought to the region on the right-hand side. Of course, hydrogen pipeline would be, the main driver. Next to those I've mentioned before, there's also the air liquide one. We'll see it in another slide later. Highways will not be a major locally, can lead to the transport of hydrogen for some clusters, but will not be the main driver of import in the region. We need to have into mind that there are a certain number of NATO pipelines passing through the region and bringing fuels to existing projects. What will be the future of your hydrogen transport in the region is also a question of security, and not only a question of economy. And so we will need to see how those fuels can be shipped via highways and pipelines, and think from that angle. Railways could be a road for derivatives, and waterways, as we mentioned before. You have 3 options, basically. The fundamental one are from the hydrogen. You can put hydrogen, you can use the methanol route, and you can use the ammonia route. The ammonia route is basically not suitable because you cannot really cross cities because of the danger it represents for population. So it should be mostly, methanol or derivatives and pure hydrogen. I could not read the question that was just put there. Let me just grab them.
I was just answering the previous question, Raphael.
The pipeline of the... Okay, good. Thank you. So I'm just taking this away. So the main conclusion of this part, the fundamental development of the hydrogen economy in the region is related to the development of those pipelines and the speed at which they will be deployed, and which one comes first and where. And so it's key to align ourselves on that vision of what's going to happen, as well as decision makers. Second, there is no existing database that aggregates all the projects in the region and the offtake. Only the TSOs have this kind of information based on a conventional basis, which is commercial. There is probably a need for the ecosystem, the hydrogen ecosystem, the region, to develop its own vision of this and to share that so that there's a better idea what's going to happen and it can be shared with political decision makers. Next to hydrogen imports, we have flagged that we could think about using waste and biomass to produce hydrogen, because that could be an additional way. And then last but not least, rivers as a way to bring hydrogen in and use hydrogen is a key topic, and people are working on it in different places of the Euregion, but alignment on this to move together faster would be great, because we see lots of elements in different places, but no unity necessarily yet. That ends up this first part on hydrogen production, hydrogen transport. What about the use of hydrogen in transport? You certainly know that the European Commission has developed a policy around the main so-called TEN-T corridors, which are essential transport corridors in Europe. You have a dozen, and if I remember well, and 3 of them are actually passing through the region. So it's respectively the North Sea, the red one, from the North Sea to the Baltics going up north, then another one, and then 2 going south, the Rhine to the Alps, which is orange on this map, and then in purple, the North Sea to the Mediterranean Sea. And you see here airports, ports, and railways and highways. What you see is that the region, I mean, it's no secret to anybody because we all live in or close to the region. This region is blessed with transport infrastructure. There's a lot of traffic going on in different forms. And so we started drilling a little bit deeper. I see another question raising. Is there an overview of the expected need for green hydrogen versus the supply of green hydrogen of the EMR? No, as I mentioned, we have not yet an aggregated view, because the main offtake, all TSOs have run a separate exercise on what is the demand, so that in their respective area of activity, so that they can develop their own plans. But in terms of aggregation of data and visibility for everybody, this is not existing yet. So that's one thing that would need to be done in order for the entire community. And we should also work, we'll see it later, on a certain number of visions of what will be the consumption by trucks on highways with certain number of simulation, and also work on what will be the consumption on rivers. And on this, we have run some calculation. Feel free to add a little smile or something if you consider your answers have been, if you got the answer you wanted. If not, we'll come back to this afterwards. Thanks a lot. So thank you for the thumb up. So we'll have more than an hour of interaction afterwards, but do not refrain from dropping, we see them questions what I took. So here you have a map of the highways, and surprisingly enough, and we shared this with the sponsor of the EMR H2 study, there is not, we couldn't find it on internet, a map of the highways in the Euregion Meuse-Rhine. So there is a political organization, Euregion Meuse-Rhine, a political initiative. Those maps exist probably, but we could not find them on the internet, nor of railways, nor of ports or airports. Okay, whereas it is nor of really like waterways, just the region. So this is key in the exercise and the joint development of the hydrogen economy that we are now going to work upon together. We need maps, we need things that are fully dedicated, as well as figures that are fully dedicated. So we just did that manually, but that gives you an idea and shows you how the region is a big, big roundabout just for, trucks traffic. And so after that, we wanted to share with you, that came from a very interesting interview. Somebody, basically shared with us, and we said that should be, it's public knowledge, but it's good to frame it. We noticed that there is a difference in terms of subsidies regarding hydrogen refueling station and hydrogen trucks across the different countries and Europe. And we have added France because, I mean, if we look, at stations in the corridor of the Euregion, we need to take all the surrounding ones. Luxembourg is not there because they're just starting with the hydrogen policies. We can talk about it afterwards if you want, but there's not yet a fully dedicated framework. So thanks for the link to the study. So here what you see is that in Germany, I mean, Germany right now is kind of blessed with public subsidies. You get 80% on the station, and you get 80% of the delta between the price of the diesel truck and the hydrogen truck. Okay. And whereas in the Netherlands, there is no financing scheme right now, but there will be soon an upcoming 250 million euro package that will support development of alternative fuel. And in that, there should be ways to finance hydrogen station and hydrogen vehicles. In Belgium, there is subsidies, but they are at a level which is limited, both on the station side and the truck side, which does not prevent the projects to get developed, but there are limited numbers, and usually, it's front runners taking the risk, putting money there to understand. In France, it's limited. I take the example, for instance, of the H2 corridor that has been developed in the Occitanie region. This is a project that we have been helped shaping over the past 3 years, SEIA Consulting and Hydrogen Advisors. So the European Investment Bank and the European Commission came with close to 60 million out of the 75 million of the infrastructure cost that was needed. The gap has been filled by the region and private player. And regarding trucks, it's the region who decided to finance the gap because there was no system at European level nor national level. It does not mean that the ADEME, which is the agency supporting this kind of hydrogen refueling station trucks project, does not finance, but it depends project from project. You see here 25% of CapEx in one usually, and in the South region, they went a little bit up. And now they have a new facility of close to 200-300 million, and we'll probably see new things coming in. So it leaves me with the fact to complement the view with what's happening at EU level. So you have this clean facility to support corridors that was used in Occitanie, where they only finance 30% of the infrastructure. And or sometimes can go a little bit higher depending on case and players, but that gives you a general idea. And there was a financing of trucks, but this was a one-time shot or 2 times or 3 times shot via pilot project, via a call for tender under the Clean Hydrogen Partnership. Last but not least, you see on this comparison that there are in some countries tolls on diesel or no tolls on diesel. So there are differences also as regards your business plan and how it's been affected by taxes. And so as a conclusion, you see here very clearly by lining things one next to the other one, that you may have an uneven development of hydrogen refueling station in the different zones of the territory of the EMR region, because these policies of support depend on what each country and province may do. And what is done at national level matters a lot. And so in other words, it's like if you would say, okay, we need to have a highway, new highway ecosystem in a zone which is empty of highways, but you realize that people on one side of the map have the means to build a highway, but not necessarily people on the other hand side have the same means. So you put a highway, but it stops at a border. In other words, here, if we want to have hydrogen trucks going through the region, they need to have a hydrogen refueling station every 200 kilometers. And so we need to think properly how this is going to happen and how to fill the gap and take into account the different schemes and fill the gap where it's needed. And that requires a common ambition at EU regional level, Dutch, Belgians, and Germans all together. So with this, I move to the river part and look at this beautiful map of the river system of Rhine and Meuse, next to Moselle and Seine, and you see how, actually how the traffic is intense on the Rhine and the Meuse. For those who see this map for the first time, for me, the first time I saw it was really a shock. It's super intense. You have further details on what is below, with the colors, what is pure transit, what is export imports, and national, gives you an idea also of the respective levels. We did something, actually, Leopold ran that corner of the table calculation together with the sponsors of the study. We just said, okay, well, and that answers a little bit the question that we had before on have you got some ideas about numbers? We tried to run a calculation of what could be the total hydrogen demand on that ecosystem if they were to use hydrogen as a substitute now as a fuel. And you basically come to 150 kiloton per hydrogen per year, which is quite significant. So in other words, working together to identify which fleets could move to hydrogen where would create additional demand, which would be a major input for TSOs and in our global equation at the region level. There is one comment, which is hydrogen trucks in the Netherlands can be financed through the EVO-NZ subsidy, but the budget is limited. And there's also a tax deduction scheme called EMR. Thanks a lot. We'll take that into account in the further discussions regarding the hydrogen road corridor. Thanks for sharing. Here, it is a very nice slide that has been given to us by the Central Commission for the Navigation on the Rhine. These are public visions of what they see happening with two scenarios. The one hand, on the right-hand side, conservative, left-hand side, non-conservative of the penetration of fuel. I'll make it quick for you. The brown part and the orange part is the existing CO2 loaded fuels. The green, dark green and light green are bio liquids. The yellow is batteries, and all that is above in blue, dark blue, light blue, purple, and pink are H2 and H2 derivatives. And what they see is that in an ambitious scenario, up to 45% of the propulsion of riverboats could be on the Rhine based on hydrogen and derivatives by 2050. Whereas another 30% would be batteries, and the rest CO2 bio or non-bio CO2 related fuels. So here, you have a great equation to work from. And so before I show you the next slide, sorry, we just said, well, are you working on pilot project? Where do you see hydrogen refueling station coming? And then many of them said, of the people who are involved in the river system said, well, actually, we are wondering whether we need to put local production from the grids with electrolyzer on site and or connect ourselves to existing pipelines, because we feel that pipelines could be not so far. So we did a small exercise of mapping. We mapped the pipelines, anticipated pipelines, on the same map as the existing river system, and you see that it's pretty well matching. It's kind of normal because you have industrial zone along the big rivers, and those pipelines are following some previous gas pipeline routes. And so means that if we clearly identify, the logistic zone, the river demand, and we further work together on this, could connect to the hydrogen pipeline. We have also added here, in dotted pipe we didn't show you before, but which is matching also the routes of previous pipeline we have showed you of the aggregated pipeline. Here, this was not a demand that we had during the study, an initial demand, which is to look more precisely at what is happening in terms of barges across rivers in Europe. But as we did this research for other missions, and so we further refined it working on this project, we wanted to give you all a view of what is going on, so you may read it quietly at home afterwards. I will just focus on the 3 projects that are with the blue line, which are in the EMR region or related, which is for the Zeldi project, which is a hydrogen refueling station on a barge starting from the port of Renory in Liège. The H2 ships project up left between Belgium and the Netherlands, working, it's an Interreg project as well, working on the economy of barges and progressing pretty well. And then the Rhine 2 project, which here is extremely ambitious with 280 hydrogen-powered barges, and it's via the CEF funding, which is the fund I referred to before. So that shows you that things are happening, it's being developed, so we can definitely take that route and further work together on this. So here we have a comment from Ariane. What are the 3 biggest factor drivers causing the difference between the conservative scenario and the innovative scenario for the use of H2 as a propulsion of inland barge? Very good question. I don't know if you have somebody of the CCNR in the room. I suggest we park it for the discussion afterwards. We keep that, Ariane, your interesting question. And we'll see if we have somebody in the room afterwards, or if not, we'll discuss it together. So what can we take out of this part, which is the main conclusion on regarding transport? The fact is that we concentrate in our region a very, very large part and a very large part of barges and volumes. And so this is core to our economy. Somewhere in the back of our hand, we know because there's a Rhine and the Meuse, we have seen barges, but there's an economy behind there. There are SMEs, there are competencies. And so we should work on this, making the Euregion the experts across Europe, potentially in partnership with some other regions, but I mean, a leading player and ecosystem of the development of hydrogen barges, because that will, lead to our scientists working on certain technologies, our operators working on others, SMEs being involved, and basically greening transport of goods, which is already greener than road, but could be even more close to net zero. So that's for rivers and standards that need to be worked on, because rivers can also be used to transport some hydrogen or derivatives. And then the other part is on the highway and the trucks part. We need to work on the harmonization and fill the gap and develop a global view for all players there involved. That's the second very big message. So with this, I will be able, besides if there is another question, but there are people reacting to the scenario, so we'll see afterwards. I will move to the last part before a general summary of this presentation, which is what can we do regarding cross-border collaboration. We are 45 minutes into the discussion, so I think we will have more than an hour to discuss together. So what can we do to increase cross-border collaboration? We are in the presence across the 3 subparts of the region of already established hydrogen clusters. So you have first starting from the left, you have also nationwide organization, provincial organization. So you have Waterstofnet, so it's basically Flanders and the Netherlands. You have in the Waterstoff cluster Limburg. Then you have to the east the Handelskammer Deutschland, or the Handelskammer Industrie Aachen, which is basically the trade chamber, but has a group focusing on hydrogen. And then Cluster Tweed, our host today, has developed the H2 Hub Wallonia. And last but not least, together with Waterstofnet, they have been the initiators of the Belgian Hydrogen Council, which will be kickstarted in the coming days. So you see that there are a number of groups and associations that bring together players at local level or national level working on hydrogen. And the reality is that some players who are active across the different regions, part of all of them make the connection always as the leaders, hence this H2 EMR Booster that they have decided to launch together and looking for subsidies to make it fly. But we also realize that people do not know each other, and there is not let's say, Euregion Euregion club. And we are, as a community, we need to get together to develop this, to develop a common vision, to work at the borders. And during the interviews we had a very interesting call with one person who told us, well, it's so silly that I go and try to find partners for certain things in the US or India, whereas I could probably find them across the border, but actually I don't really know because I don't have that connection and vision. So that is a major takeout. And this is the reason why, as a next step to this debrief, we invite you to invite others to join us in Francorchamps. It's a great place to be, physically, a one-day event with further discussion with different players on the maritime, on the riverside, on the corridor side, on what to do together on this Euregion ecosystem of the Euregion. We wouldn't be complete if we wouldn't have touched upon technologies, research center, what is happening. We have talked to different people. We have noticed that usually local players tend to know who can help them locally. For instance, I'll take the example of Energieville in Genk in Belgian Limburg, who people have worked together, on the refueling station of the city, of the local city. But this is not an isolated example, but still we do not have, even if you have these local things, we don't have yet something at Euro level. But looking for what is happening, we find something that we had not in the initial documentation, because a certain number of elements were already gathered, which we found extremely interesting, even though we haven't had discussion yet with them. It's the Jülich ecosystem in the German part of the territory. I put it short, you see it below. The idea is basically to gather, started during COVID, and then they did the first physical event. The idea is to bring research, society, and industry together and work through the development of an ecosystem of joint expertise, built step by step around a certain number of key topics, like you see on the left, hydrogen burners or hydrogen in pipelines. So basically working together on projects to solve issues, and then from there develop a competencies where you have put big, medium, and small players together in research center, and you can basically help other people with similar projects or similar issues, and you can also sell your competencies across borders. So that is of interest, could be further enlarged at Euregion level. We found it interesting and wanted to flag it to you. So the outcome of this part is we need to connect the hydrogen station. We need to be with a common identity at Euregion level. We'll see. There will be probably the development of a Euregion H2 cluster as such. We need to map also the value chains. It has been done. Basically, all the different associations we have mentioned have done it for the ecosystem. Should be done in a aggregated way, and that's probably an easy mapping. Still requires some work, but it's an easy mapping that we could do in the coming weeks. There are concrete R&D and SMEs working together in certain parts of the territories, giving the aggregated view, and developing something beyond borders could be also a target. And last but not least, we need together with the agencies of the territory and the different countries to work on the skill sets and the competencies of talents to make sure that that territory at the corner of the borders will be blessed by talents. So with this, I come to the summary and the next step. I do believe you got it all, but just as a way to repeat it, to anchor our common vision. No hydrogen no EMR H2 Booster. So we need to act on pipes and market integration. We need to make sure that it's easy to understand how you buy, hydrogen cross-border. Right now, we're still in national mechanism, not completely European. It's coming. We need also to further identify how we could eventually produce a little bit more on the territory next to imports. Second, heavy duty is the heavyweight champion, but you need a heavy impulse. We need to work to unite across river system, and we need to unite across highway systems. The details we already mentioned them. And then interaction across borders and SMEs can benefit from a boost. And so we need to build the value chain. We need to aggregate our ecosystem. We need to give a global view, an aggregated view of the value chain across the borders of the richness of the ecosystem. And then we need from there to work on specific streams. So Francorchamps will give us a place to further structure that. There will be three main streams, which is, working together, not only in Francorchamps, but also beyond, because, here it's a debrief in an ongoing process. There will be many other steps. So there will be people working on the hydrogen ecosystem as a whole, global overarching view. There will be groups of players focusing more on hydrogen road corridor across the different parts of the territory and countries. And there will be people working on the hydrogen river corridor, namely not only hydrogen use, but also transport. What we plan to do in SPA, beyond getting together for the first time and setting the base of this common identity, it will be to sign a declaration of intent, like you probably heard about the Linz declaration in the past. If you do not remember, in 2017, we had finally, I'm talking here, it's the European hydrogen ecosystem. After a couple of years of engagement with EU energy ministers and commissioners, for those, some of you know, I was the president of Hydrogen Europe at that time. We had engaged with EU ministers, but we couldn't bring them to say hydrogen is key. And so it happened at an informal council in Linz. And there was there on the table a declaration for all ministers to sign, plus all interested companies active in the hydrogen field. And the declaration was non-binding, but was just saying, hydrogen is key, we want to be part of it, and we want to structure it at European level. Everybody could have its logo and sign. That is what we intend to do here in SPA. So you will receive a simple declaration, and we invite you to discuss it internally and be part of this common identity in shaping and sign the declaration that day. Thanks for this. I do believe that with this, I can hand over to Cédric and Valère, our hosts, and we have now, as plans, an hour for further Q&A, and I think we can move to open questions, and not anymore in the chat, besides if you want to add comment. Thanks a lot. I hope that was useful to you, like it was useful to us and the partners, and it's only a first additional step in the direction of creating the EMR H2 Booster and community identity.